So for today, we're going to introduce the SARI Reference Data Service, and I'm particularly happy that we can use today's sessions to demonstrate what this thing can. And I'm also really happy that the introduction will be made, or the presentation will be made first by Wolfgang Schell. He used to work for University of Zurich and Swiss Art Research Infrastructure in parallel to his job at the Metafacts company, which is behind the tech stack for the RDS services. He will give us an in-depth introduction to SARI RDS. Now, afterwards, we're going to have a hands-on from Florian Kreutli, and I will just start with a few remarks. Why do we do this? Just to start with, the goal and the mission of the Swiss Art Research Infrastructure is to provide mutual access to research resources from specialized institutions. That might be academic, it might be non-academic, it might be research groups, it might be collections, museums, whatever. And by saying so, we assume that the data from collection is sometimes 100, sometimes 200-300 years old, and it holds a lot of information which is important for research. We would all consult these information, but there is no chance to access it via a network of any kinds. I mean, you can access it by seeing the record books, you can access it by seeing digitized record books, but there is no single point of access for that. By connecting all these data, we obviously want to connect the knowledge, the expert knowledge in art history. This is our mission. Now, what's needed for that? We need a unified, we obviously need a multilingual access, and an access that is independent from software. Having a unified access, having a software independent access is self-explanatory. The multilingual thing is a little bit a Swiss thing. I guess you might understand that we all are fluent in any languages if you consult library catalogs, but when it comes to data, it's not self-explanatory that this works well. And obviously, what we also want to have it human interpretable, and we want to have it machine processable. So what you came up is a linked open data network. Now, why actually is this so important? I will just give you one example, how it looks when it comes to aggregated image repositories. When we wrote the proposal for the Swiss Art Research Infrastructure, Tristan Wedding and myself, we analyzed a little bit what tools we do have. For instance, we found out that if you're looking at something like Europeana, which is really honorable and verdienstvoll, you would say that in German, project, if you're performing multilingual searches, for instance, for Gian Lorenzo Bernini or Giovanni Lorenzo Bernini, or in French, you would query for Le Bernin, you would get 3 total different result sets, and that's unacceptable from a research point of view. Also from a technical point of view, and I'm quite sure they did a really good job, and they aggregated data, so it's difficult to harmonize them, and still they had issues, and still currently they have issues. We just did the same tests recently, and you still have the same problems when you approach it via full text search. The same is true for other extremely early and important projects such as Prometheus. Now, this was the problem we saw here is for collection data, which tend to be quite stable, and there is an incentive for collections to invest in multilinguality, in connectivity, in visibility of their data. The problem is getting even worse when it comes to research data, because first of all, researchers want to have more detailed, more granular expressions or statements. Florian Kreutli was showing a beautiful example yesterday about Mona Lisa. So researchers want to have statements which are beyond a binary saying artwork A is from artist B, or building C has been paid by patron D, and so on. So they are way more granular. So it is about which archival objects depicts which build object here. And I show an example from one of the pilot projects of the Swiss Art Research Infrastructure. It's the experimental design research project, depicting the collection information from a Swiss engineer architect from the early or mid 20th century. And there is a SNFS paid research project ongoing, and they need to have really granular statements to express their findings. So here it's even more complicated, first of all, from a scholarly view, and second of all, researchers won't have the patience to look up all possible identifiers to make sure that our data for any given place or exhibition, as you see it on the left side of the schema, an exhibition at Princeton University, they won't bother, and they don't have the time. They are not paid for looking up all those identifiers to make sure that their data are reusable, compatible to other data sets, and so on. So what we came up with, and I like to show this scheme because it's a lot of irony in there. We came up with the idea of coming up with a linked national linked data network for art history. This is a scheme that we turned in the proposal 8 years ago, literally exactly 8 years. And there you see we wanted just to connect the players in Switzerland. We obviously, since it is Swiss founding, we added an imaginary green line to make sure to the people that give us the money that we solve the problems for Switzerland and do not solve the problem of the world or try to solve the problems of the world. But obviously, a linked data network will go beyond national boundaries, as we want it to go beyond lingual boundaries and technical boundaries. So this is what we came up with. What we realized that in order to allow researchers to produce data in a meaningful way in a linked data network, we need to bring the reference data, like references for persons, for places, for groups, for buildings, for archival objects, whatever, you name it. We need to bring them directly to the researchers, because otherwise they don't have the time and the energy to make these alignments. It works obviously quite well in a that's actually the data ETL process that we use for the aforementioned EASL project. So it works quite well with the data alignment in an ETL process. You see here in the middle, on the bottom, you see a Open Refine instance, which actually uses RDS services, but it's even a little bit more complicated. It needs a more complicated tech stack to bring that to the researchers in the very moment when he or she produces the information. And this is and that's the end of my introduction. So that's let's say the political, but also the research background of what we do. And the first session from Wolfgang will actually be about how we can build a tech stack which allows us to bring all these reference data from one single point of access directly to the researcher's platform or editorial environment. Thank you very much. I'm looking forward to Wolfgang's presentation. Wolfgang, please.